They didn't hear the sound of my sacrifices, but they built their empire on the silence I gave them. I used to believe the world ran on merit. That excellence, sooner or later, forced its way into the spotlight. But the longer I sat at that desk, the more I realized spotlights don't move on their own. They're pointed, chosen, directed away from people like me. My name is Claire Voss, 36, lead developer in title only. And for 8 years, I was the nameless scaffolding that held their empire together. They called me reliable. They meant invisible. Every morning, I showed up 2 hours early. Not because they asked, because the system wouldn't survive without it. Every late-night email got answered. Every impossible deadline got met. Every innovation you heard them present had my fingerprints underneath the surface. But I never said anything. Not when Marcus rewrote my documentation and signed his initials. Not when Darren repackaged my performance review as team growth metrics. And not when Sylvia, the project manager, who never touched a line of code, suddenly appeared on our patent application as co-creator. They didn't steal with violence. They used smiles and collaboration decks. Polished phrases like cross-functional integration to make my name disappear. And the truth, I let them because I thought someday someone would notice. Someone would say, who actually built this, but no one ever did. Until the Meridian project. Until the one opportunity that changed everything. Until I finally stopped whispering and started owning what I'd created. That moment didn't begin with fireworks. It began in a windowless conference room. With stale coffee, blinking fluorescent lights, and a man I once respected saying, Claire, we need someone who can translate the complexity. You're not exactly client-facing material. And just like that, my 6 months of midnight labor became supporting work. My name erased from the proposal, again. But here's what they didn't know. While they were planning the spotlight, I was rewriting the architecture. And when the spotlight came, it turned. Not because I fought for it, but because the system couldn't answer without me. I didn't plan a grand rebellion. I didn't leak emails or stage a walkout. I just stopped hiding. I started signing things. My code. My architecture. My name, the future they thought they owned, was mine. They just didn't know it yet. But they would. Every stolen applause has an expiration date. And mine. It was coming fast. Hay stopped seeing me. But I never stopped seeing everything. There's a strange kind of power in being overlooked. At first, it feels like erasure. Later, it becomes something else. Freedom without witness. A ghost in the machine. That's what I became. After they sidelined me from the Meridian presentation, I stopped pushing. No more requests to join meetings. No more chasing inclusion. I let them forget I was in the room. I let them ignore the one person who actually understood the backbone of the system. But every keystroke I made, every line of code I wrote, was a record, a receipt, a quiet warning. They thought the system was theirs because they printed their names on slide decks. Because they rehearsed buzzwords in the mirror and smiled for executives. Because they mistook noise for knowledge. But the Meridian project was a different beast. It wasn't a marketing strategy. It wasn't a gimmick. It was a living, breathing AI-integrated supply chain infrastructure that only I could tame. And it was temperamental. If you didn't understand the logic at its core, it wouldn't just fail. It would expose you. I began documenting everything. Not because I expected a fight, but because I felt it in my bones, that low hum in your gut that says, they're setting you up to disappear again. One night, around 2:00 a.m., I walked past the glass-walled executive office. Inside, I saw Marcus and Darren rehearsing a walkthrough. Darren was stumbling through terms he barely understood. Marcus was coaching him through my algorithm like it was his invention. They paused when they saw me. Marcus offered a tight-lipped smile. Darren didn't even pretend. Didn't expect anyone here this late, he said. I smiled. I'm always here this late. I replied, some of us don't need rehearsals to explain things we built. That was the moment I knew. They weren't just erasing me. They were preparing to replace me. Not fire me. Just absorb me into the background of their success story. a footnote in someone else's legacy. But ghosts, we don't stay buried forever. I started moving in silence. I stopped copying my team leads on technical memos. I rewrote key functions of the system quietly, securely, filed documentation under my personal vault with time-stamped encryption. If they wanted to present my system, they'd be holding a box with wires they didn't know how to connect. But I wasn't bitter. Not yet. I was strategic. Every injustice became a lever. Every dismissal, a sharpened edge. They were writing their betrayal in real time. And I was building the response. One night, I sat alone in the server room, surrounded by the hum of machines that actually knew my value. I whispered to the silence. Let them come for the credit. Let them try to wear my crown. I'll be waiting where it really matters. Then came the slide deck. Not just an oversight, not just my name missing, but deliberate fabrication. A timeline that placed Marcus as lead systems designer. Bullet points attributed to Darren's innovation. My work presented with such certainty, it looked like I'd never touched it. And at the bottom, technical contributions supported by Claire Voss. Supported as if I were an intern, a ghost assistant to their genius. That's when I stopped waiting. I printed it, made 3 copies, one I kept for myself. One I mailed to my mother. She didn't understand my work, but she understood me. And the third, I slid under the office door of someone who mattered. Rialel Takahashi, CEO of Meridian Logistics. No note, no explanation, just a quiet act of disruption. If they wanted to steal my voice, then I'd teach them what silence really sounds like. The deadliest ghosts aren't the ones that haunt. They're the ones who wait, who watch, who build, and then sign the world under their own name. They rehearsed for weeks, for a performance built on a script I never wrote. Because I was too busy building the story. It was Friday. The big pitch, the meeting that could land us the $5, $8 million Meridian contract, the crown jewel project that was supposed to put our firm on the global map. And there I stood, back of the room, holding a clipboard I didn't need, wearing the dark navy blazer that made me look professional, but feel invisible. Watching, I didn't belong at the table, not according to them. Marcus was at the head, smug and relaxed, with that rehearsed gleam in his voice. Darren had the confidence of someone who'd never been questioned. Sylvia, bless her, looked like she actually believed the buzzwords on the slides. And Warren stood like a king in borrowed armor, all charisma. No code, pacing the stage as if the blueprint of the future was his birthright. They were presenting my future. My sleepless nights, my pneumonia-laced breakthroughs, my lonely too. Victories, and they were doing it badly. The first 20 minutes were tolerable, wrong vocabulary. But manageable, fluff where substance should have been expected. But then came the distribution algorithm. The one I had bled for. The one that had nearly broken me, until it didn't. Until it became the thing I was proudest of in my career. And this next module, Darren began, tapping the remote like a magician mid-trick. Uses a modified Bayesian forecasting model to dynamically adjust to supply chain fluctuations. He said the words, but he didn't understand them. And then came the question, Rialel Takahashi, CEO of Meridian. I didn't lean back. She leaned in. Can you walk me through how this system compensates for meteorological disruptions in the Southeast Asia corridor? She asked, fingers steepled, eyes razor sharp. The room paused. Marcus looked at Darren. Darren looked at Warren. Sylvia shifted uncomfortably. Well, Warren said, drawing out the word like a lifeline, as Darren mentioned. We utilize a probabilistic framework to... That's not what I asked. Rialel interrupted. I asked about real-time weather compensation. In a region known for unpredictability, how exactly does your model pivot? Silence. They were drowning in it. And then I spoke. I didn't raise my hand. I didn't clear my throat. I just said it. The algorithm integrates live meteorological data feeds, I said from the back of the room, and uses predictive modeling to proactively reroute shipments based on signal decay and historical variance, not reaction. But anticipation? 20 heads turned, including hers, especially hers. Rialel blinked, studying me. And you are? She asked. Before I could speak, Warren jumped in too fast. That's Claire, he said, one of our developers who supported the technical side. Supported? My mouth went dry, but my spine stayed straight. No, I said. Stepping forward, I architected the entire system. The Southeast Asia solution is based on my white paper from last year on adaptive supply chain dynamics. I built it. There it was, no emotion. No trembling. Just truth, a decade of silence undone by one sentence. Rialel turned to Warren. I'd like Claire to walk us through the technical documentation. Now, Warren stammered. That's not necessary. We weren't planning on a deep dive today. I insist, she said. Her tone, final. And so I walked to the front, plugged in my laptop, opened the source files, and spoke for 42 minutes about architecture design, about failure trees, about the redundant layers that prevent cascade collapses, about the human cost of a 7% delay in pharmaceutical supply chains, and how I solved for it. No one interrupted. No one corrected me. They couldn't, because it was mine. They had taken the stage, but I had taken the room. When I finished, the silence wasn't awkward. It was respectful. And for the first time in my career, it was mine. Rialel closed her notebook and stood. I think we've seen what we needed to see, she said. And she left without looking back at Marcus or Darren or Warren. But before she walked out the door, she turned to me. Claire, I'd like a word with you, alone. After this, Warren's jaw twitched. He knew. That day, the stage crumbled, the performance collapsed, and the ghost in the machine became the name on the system. I didn't sabotage them. I didn't leak anything. I didn't scream. I simply stood up and let the truth do what it always does. Cut through the noise. Most turning points come loud. This one came with a closed door and a chair only I was invited to sit in. The room was empty now, except for me, Rialel Takahashi, and her CFO. No more executives. No team leads trying to speak over me. No slide decks with stolen words. Just silence and scrutiny. She gestured to a seat. Sit, she said simply, and I did, across from her. She leaned in, eyes sharp but curious, like a scientist examining a data anomaly that didn't fit the projection. Not an error, but a breakthrough. That was quite illuminating. She began. I waited, not eager, not proud, just steady. I have one more question, she said. The contract we're about to sign with your firm, who will be signing off on the technical specifications? I opened my mouth, hesitated. Probably Warren. That's how it always worked. He'd get the credit. I'd get the maintenance tickets and the blame when the system needed tuning. But I told the truth. Technically, Warren would sign. I said, he's the department head. Rialel looked at her CFO, then back at me. That won't work for us, she said. My heart started to hammer. Slowly, the person who designed the system signs for it. She continued. That's non-negotiable. I blinked. Yes, that would be me. She nodded. Then you'll be signing. Then she reached into her jacket and pulled out a business card, matte black. Silver text, heavier than it looked. My direct line is on the back. If there's any pushback on this, you call me not your manager, not your HR, me. I took it like it was a passport, because that's what it felt like. A way out, a way forward. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at that card on my nightstand like it had started glowing. A week ago, I would have never dared to dream of something like this. A name like mine, Claire Voss, appearing at the top of a technical contract tied to a multi-million-dollar deal. Unheard of, unwelcome, and now, non-negotiable. By morning, I had made a decision. I didn't wear my usual neutrals that Monday. I pulled out a tailored suit I bought 3 years ago. Deep navy with subtle silver accents. the one I never had the nerve to wear. That day, I walked into the building like I owned something. Not the company, but my value. As expected, Warren called me into his office. He didn't even let me sit down. The most unprofessional display I've ever seen. He started, "You undermined the entire team. Made us look disorganized, weak." I didn't flinch. I told the truth. I said, "You lied by omission. You don't understand how this works." "Claire." He snapped. "This is business. No one succeeds alone." "You mean no one succeeds unless they have someone to stand on?" His eyes narrowed. "You're not ready for this." He said, "You're too emotional, too focused on recognition." I handed him a folder, thick, stapled, signed. "These are my terms," I said. He opened it. Official title, Lead Systems Architect. Ownership in public documentation. Project leadership of the implementation team. 15% salary adjustment. Direct liaison with Meridian. He laughed. Not because it was funny, because he was panicking. "This is extortion." He spat. "No," I replied. "This is negotiation. You need my signature, and Meridian won't move forward without it." Silence. Then the pivot, "You'll sign under my overall approval." He said, "Standard hierarchy." "No." I replied, "I could fire you for this." He threatened. "You could," I agreed, "but then you'll need to explain to Meridian why the systems architect is suddenly unavailable. I don't think that conversation will go well for you." It wasn't rage. It wasn't vengeance. It was alignment between what I knew I was and what I finally demanded to be seen as. Warren didn't respond right away. He just stared at me. But I saw something I'd never seen in his face before. Not anger, not frustration, fear. Not of me, but of losing the thing he couldn't replace. I left his office with my heart trying to beat out of my chest. My legs trembled. My palms were slick, and for the first time in 8 years, I didn't care. That night, I ate Thai food on the floor of my apartment with my sister, Nora. "I can't believe you did that," she said. "I'm terrified." I replied. She raised her glass. "Terrified is fine, but I'm proud of you." The next morning, I got the call, HR. Meeting, third pay. I already knew they were going to try and bury me again. But this time, I came with a shovel of my own. They didn't drag me into war. They invited me into a glass-walled room with cold coffee, clipped tones, and the quiet expectation that I'd fold. But I didn't come to negotiate my worth. I came to end the debate. 300p in Memhash Ascites, sharp. Room 12B, the neutral conference room with frosted glass walls that didn't hide anything. Warren was already there. So was Vanessa Kruger, director of HR. Expression unreadable, posture perfect. They didn't offer a seat. I took one anyway. Vanessa began. "Claire, we've reviewed your requests regarding the Meridian project." She said it like I'd made a scene. Like asking to be acknowledged for building a multi-million-dollar system was a tantrum. I didn't interrupt. "Your terms," she corrected herself, voice tightening, "have been received." Warren sat with his arms crossed, smiling the kind of smile that always meant he thought I'd lost the upper hand. And then came the offer. "We're prepared to acknowledge your contributions publicly as a key team member." Vanessa said. "Key team member? Not lead, not architect? Just included." "Additionally," she continued, "you'll be invited to join the implementation phase, though not in a leadership capacity, due to chain of command considerations." Chain of command. The same chain I'd been shackled to for years, while others climbed over me. "And," she said, sliding a paper across the table, "you're being offered a 5% performance bonus. 5. After 8 years. After pneumonia. After sacrifice. After theft." I looked at the document, then at Vanessa, then at Warren, who was practically vibrating with smugness. "No," I said quietly. "I'm sorry." she asked. I pushed the paper back. Those aren't the terms I outlined. They thought this was negotiation. But negotiation only works when both sides bring something irreplaceable. I was irreplaceable. They just didn't want to admit it. Warren leaned forward. For God's sake. Claire, be reasonable. You're going to sabotage your entire career over what? A name on a document. I stared at him. I've watched people like you erase women like me my whole career, I said, not with fists. With formatting, with team credits, with language like supported by... He opened his mouth. I didn't let him speak. I'm not asking anymore. You need my signature. Meridian made that clear. These aren't demands. They're facts. Vanessa's lips thinned. Think carefully about what you're doing, she said. This is a career-defining project. You don't want to be remembered as the person who derailed it over ego. I almost laughed. Ego? You steal a person's voice for 8 years and then call it ego when they finally speak. My ego didn't write the algorithm, I replied. My ego didn't rebuild your infrastructure at 2:00. While coughing blood into tissues, I hid in my desk drawer. The room fell silent. I did that, not for credit, not for applause, but because I thought the work would speak for itself. I leaned forward. Well, now it has, and it's calling my name. There's a moment in every silent warrior's journey where the quiet becomes dangerous. That was mine. I'm not signing anything, I said, rising, unless it reflects what I actually did. You're walking away. Warren said. I paused at the door. You have until 5:00 pay. Yes, yes. To decide, I said. After that, I call Rael Takahashi directly. Then I left. I didn't run, didn't cry, didn't even shake until I locked myself in the women's restroom stall. That's where I finally broke, not from fear. From release. Like 8 years of swallowing rage had finally found its exit. I texted my sister, gave them my terms. Now we wait. She responded 3 dots at a time. Holy seas. I'm proud of you. Terrified. But proud? Sure. You're in 7P. 13 minutes before my deadline, Vanessa appeared at my desk. Her face was a lesson in defeat, masked as professionalism. We've reconsidered, she said. She handed me a new document. They'd accepted I'd be recognized as lead architect in all documentation. I'd lead the implementation team. The raise, 12%, not 15%, but still double what they had originally offered. And most importantly, I'd sign the contract. No ghost. No footnote. My name in ink. There are expectations, she added. No gloating. No division in the team. I looked her in the eye. I've always been professional. That's never been the problem. Then I signed in front of her, and I walked out of that room like it was the end of a chapter. Because I didn't win a war that day. I just claimed the right to finally start fighting back. Some wars aren't fought with weapons. They're fought with calendars, with subject lines, with who's CC'd and who's not. It was never about control of the project. It was about control of the narrative, and they were losing both. Leadership didn't feel the way I thought it would. I didn't walk into meetings with the glow of validation. There was no applause, no congratulations, no handshake from Warren, no acknowledgement from Darren or Marcus. Only tension, the kind that buzzes beneath fluorescent lights and hides behind half smiles and Slack threads. They didn't fight me in public. They fought me with silence. They stopped inviting me to planning syncs. They replied to my emails late or not at all. They updated documents without my review, sent memos to each other about my own system like I was an intern, observing from the edge. But I didn't respond because I didn't need permission anymore. I had the contract. I had the architecture. The blueprint, the trust of Meridian, the power they used to wield, it was now mine. They just hadn't fully accepted it yet. I built the implementation team carefully. Handpicked 2 junior developers, Lena and Priya, who reminded me of myself before I'd learned to make myself small. Ye both sharp, overlooked, both buried in backlog tickets that kept them invisible. I gave them code reviews with real feedback, credit in documentation, and something they'd never received before, visibility. I didn't know I could speak up like that. Lena whispered after our first cross-department meeting. You can... I said, you just haven't had anyone who listened. Meanwhile, Warren played a different game. He couldn't outright sabotage the project, not without it tracing back to him. So he used time as a weapon. He'd delay approval chains, request last-minute changes under the guise of client alignment, push meetings to hours I couldn't make. Once, he sent an email at 11, saying 6 p.m., marked urgent, asking for documentation already delivered 5 days earlier. It wasn't incompetence. It was punishment. And I felt every jab, but I never retaliated. Because the one thing I had finally learned was this. You don't respond to power games when you already hold the board. Every week, I had a standing call with Riel Takahashi. Not with her team, not with middle managers. With her, she never asked about politics, only about progress. Claire, your system's stress-tested projections are outperforming vendor benchmarks. She told me on one call. I remember blinking at the numbers. It's working, I said softly. No, she corrected. You're working, and we see it. Those calls became lifelines, the only space where I didn't have to fight to be believed. In those 30 minutes every Friday, I was no longer defending my place. I was advancing the system. But inside Helios, the Cold War continued. In one team meeting, Darren presented an issue I'd already solved in code the week prior, but he didn't check the latest build. This part of the logic isn't scaling properly, he said, sounding pleased with himself. It was patched in V4, 7E7, I said, not looking up. He blinked, checked the repository, paused. Oh, didn't realize that was merged already. Because it wasn't announced, Marcus added, his tone loaded. I don't announce fixes, I said. I deploy them, silence. I didn't need applause. I had receipts. They weren't used to a woman who didn't ask for credit. Because I didn't need to be liked anymore. I needed to be respected. And that kind of shift doesn't come with smiles. It comes with distance. And then something happened. An executive from Meridian Not Real L showed up at Helios for an informal audit. Unannounced, unscheduled. He sat quietly through our meeting. Took notes, watched interactions, and when the meeting ended, he asked one question. Who's the decision authority on live system changes? Warren opened his mouth, but the exec raised his hand, silencing him. I wasn't asking you. He turned to me. I'm guessing it's you. I nodded. Per contract. Yes, he smiled. Just a little... Good, he said. That's what we hoped to confirm. Then he left. That moment echoed like thunder. Warren never spoke to me directly again. Not for weeks. He CC'd others, spoke around me. Above me, never to me. But I didn't mind. Because while he ignored me, I was building... By month's end, our system was fully deployed across Meridian's Southeast Asia corridor. Live data, no critical errors, 91% reduction in rerouting failures, 41% projected reduction in operational cost. I didn't get a company-wide email, or a bonus, or a plaque, but I got something better. Respect. From the client, from the developers, from the numbers, and I kept a file, a folder I never labeled, full of the Slack threads, the buried memos, the ignored contributions, just in case. Not for revenge, but for remembrance, because I never wanted to forget how they treated me when they thought I had no options. Every war has its end. But the cold ones, they leave frostbite, not scars. You move on, but you never forget how it felt to fight for warmth in a room full of people pretending not to see you shiver. I was too used to fighting to even imagine what peace might look like. So when opportunity knocked, I didn't answer. I checked the peephole 3 times, braced for a trick. Because when you've lived in the shadows, the light doesn't feel safe. It feels suspicious. It had been 3 months since the Meridian implementation began. The system was humming. Live in 3 regions, ahead of schedule, saving millions, performing like a living, breathing organism that had grown up just the way I imagined it would, because I had raised it. And yet, inside Helios, I remained a ghost with a nameplate, a threat disguised as a peer, leadership in title. Not treatment, then came the email. Subject, coffee. From Realel Takahashi. Time, 6:03 Jones. I'll be in your city this week. Would love to catch up, no agenda. Just a conversation. There's a little cafe 2 blocks from your office. Thursday. I stared at the screen for a full minute. No agenda never meant no agenda. But this wasn't an ambush. Not from her. This was something else. A test. A lifeline. Or maybe a door. Thursday arrived. I wore the same deep navy suit from the day I delivered my terms. Not for them. For me, armor doesn't always come in iron. Sometimes it comes in fabric that fits just right. The cafe was quiet, tucked between an art supply store and a florist. She was already there when I arrived. No assistants, no bodyguards, just Realel, reading a book, drinking something warm. She looked up. Claire, she said, rising with a smile. Thank you for coming. We shook hands like 2 women who understood something unspoken. About endurance, about solitude, about war. We made small talk at first. She asked about Lena and Priya. I asked about Meridian's India expansion. She smiled proud. You built something extraordinary. She said. I waited, because praise, I'd learned, was often the appetizer to exploitation, but it didn't come with strings. Just sincerity. You didn't just deliver a system. She continued. You delivered trust. In an industry that runs on delays and excuses, you delivered accountability. I didn't know how to answer, so I just nodded. Then she got quiet. Then came the real reason. Not all game changers start with a question. Some begin with a card, and a sentence that feels like thunder inside your chest. She pulled out a card and slid it across the table. Not her usual one. This one read, Julian Chen, CTO, Meridian Innovations. We're building a new division, she said. Something bold, decentralized. Creative, unafraid. I stayed silent. We need someone to lead it. She continued. Julian and I have been reviewing candidates. Your name came up. I swallowed hard. You want me to join Meridian? She tilted her head. No, we want you to lead Meridian, this part of it. Build your own team. Define your own culture. You'd report directly to Julian. Equity, full benefits, freedom. I looked at the card again. My hands didn't tremble, but something inside me did. Hope. Real, raw, terrifying hope. I don't know what to say. I admitted. You don't have to say anything now, she said. Finish your implementation. Leave well, but don't shrink from this. Claire, I nodded. What's the timeline? We'll wait for you, but don't wait too long. This is yours. If you want it, then she stood. Put on her coat, left money for both our drinks. And as she reached the door, she turned back. One more thing. She said, when we first met, I thought you were brilliant. Now I know you're necessary. That's rarer. Then she was gone. I sat there long after she left, Julian Chen's card between my fingers, a future I'd never dared to imagine pressing against my palm. I walked back to Helios in a daze. Nothing had changed. Same flickering elevator light. Same badge beep at the security turnstile. Same polite nods from people who couldn't meet my eye. But I had changed, because for the first time in my career, I wasn't asking for a seat. I was being offered the table. That afternoon, I stared at the card again. This wasn't an escape. This was ascension. But I still had work to finish. a team to protect, a project to close. Because leaving chaos behind didn't feel like power. Finishing what I started that did. I didn't know what I'd say to Julian yet, but I knew what I'd say to myself. We don't shrink anymore. We don't whisper anymore. We walk through open doors, and we hold them open behind us. The world taught me to accept what I was offered. But this time, I didn't wait for a seat at the table. I brought my own chair, my own pen, and my own conditions. Because the signature they wanted came with terms they didn't expect. I didn't say yes right away. The offer from Meridian stayed in my drawer for 10 days, not because I was unsure of the future, but because I needed to finish the present. We were 30 days from going live in all regions. Lena and Priya were thriving. The code was stable. The client was happy. And for once, I wasn't walking away from a mess. I was walking away from proof. Proof that when given the reins, I didn't flinch. I didn't fracture. I led. Still, Warren's campaign continued. Late-night requests, undermining comments in meetings, subtle messages to leadership questioning whether I was overextending. He couldn't stop the machine, so he tried to sour the story. But Betrayal was watching, and so was Meridian's executive team. And the data? It screamed success. 2 weeks before launch, I requested a formal review session with Helios leadership. I didn't need to, but I chose to because the person I used to be, the one who whispered complaints in restrooms and stayed late to be seen, she needed to witness what it looked like to stand firm. Vanessa, Warren, and 3 other senior staffers filed into the boardroom. I handed them the printed metrics: uptime, latency, system efficiency, client satisfaction scores. They were perfect. Claire, Vanessa began, these numbers are exceptional. You and your team have truly delivered. I nodded once. Warren didn't speak. He just stared at the pages like they'd betrayed him. Then came my turn. There's one more document you need to review, I said. I passed it across the table. An official notice of resignation, effective in 3 weeks post-launch. Vanessa's face didn't change. But Warren, he flinched. You're leaving, she asked, carefully neutral. Yes. Can I ask why? I looked her in the eye. You can... But you already know, it wasn't an exit interview. It was an exit announcement. I didn't owe them a story. I owed myself a clean departure. When I got back to my desk, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Once just transviert sorrindir. I answered, Claire, speaking. This is Julian Chen. His voice was calm. Grounded, efficient. Betrayal told me you might be calling. I just turned in my resignation. I said, good. He replied, let's talk. We didn't meet in a boardroom. We met at a co-working space Meridian was prototyping for their future teams. Minimalist, open, quiet. Julian handed me a proposal. I expected a job description. Instead, it was a blank framework. My structure. He said, your content, build it how you want. Just tell me what you need. I blinked. Wait, you want me to write the job? He nodded. Claire, we didn't reach out because we need a developer. We reached out because we need an architect of innovation culture. What do you want this role to be? The girl I used to be would have panicked, would have asked, what's the salary? What's the ceiling? But the woman sitting at that table, she knew her value, and she named it. I opened my notebook and wrote, title, Director of Systems Innovation, team size, 12, scalable to 30, authority, full build autonomy. Reporting, CTO only, equity, yes, founding member of the division. Julian read it, smiled, and nodded. Done. I raised an eyebrow. You don't want to negotiate. We don't negotiate with people building the future for us, he said. We partner with them. That sentence stayed with me longer than the contract. Over the next 3 weeks, I wrapped up my work at Helios with brutal efficiency, documented every component, trained replacements, met every deadline, they couldn't accuse me of flaking, or abandoning, or being emotional. I left with receipts and dignity. No goodbye lunch, no card, no speech, just silence. The same silence they'd taught me to live in. But this time, I was the one walking out of it. On my final day, I left my badge on Warren's desk. He never looked me in the eye again. Not after I submitted the resignation. Not after the Meridian system went live without a single post-deploy bug. Not after his team began quietly applying for jobs elsewhere. Because sometimes the most deafening sound in a man's career is the door closing on his control. I didn't storm out. I didn't make a scene. I didn't gloat. I just left, with the blueprint of their future in my hands, and my name at the bottom. Signed, dated, claimed. They stole my credit for years. Now I build credits for others, real ones. With names. With titles. With power. Because the greatest revenge is never just leaving. It's creating a world where what happened to you can't happen again. My first day at Meridian felt like a trick. No suspicious looks, no silent treatment, no one wondering how I got there. Just space, air, possibility. Julian gave me a tour of the new floor plan. One wall was glass, overlooking the skyline. Another was a giant whiteboard blank. Waiting. You have budget for 12 headcount to start. He said, build wisely. I already knew who I wanted. That night, I sent 4 messages. To Lena, remember when you said you didn't know if you could lead? Want to find out? To Priya, you ever want to write the rules instead of following them? I've got a pen. To Javier from DevOps, no politics here, just performance and purpose. Interested? To Mina, a systems analyst from another company who'd been passed over for promotion twice. I saw what you built. They didn't. I do. 4 messages, 4 hires, 4 people who had talent but no platform. And that was just the start. We called ourselves the architects, not because we designed systems, but because we built frameworks for innovation, for inclusion, for recognition. Every sprint review had one mandatory slide. Name the builder, not the team, not the initiative. The individual, the architect behind the magic. And slowly, word got out. Former colleagues from Helios began reaching out. Some congratulated, some were curious, some asked if there were roles open. One message from a junior engineer read, "You probably don't remember me. We met once in the break room. But seeing you speak at that launch changed how I see this whole game. I didn't know we were allowed to say no." Thank you. Another wrote, "They told me you were difficult. But now I think maybe they just weren't used to a woman who didn't flinch. I hadn't realized how many of us were carrying the same wounds. Quiet. Parallel, until one voice stood up and said, not anymore. 3 months into the role, Meridian's Southeast Asia results were made public. Operational savings exceeded 44%. Customer delay incidents down 61%. Investor confidence rose. Tech blogs wrote articles with headlines like, "The invisible engineer behind Meridian's breakthrough supply system." Except I wasn't invisible anymore. The byline read, "Claire Voss, Director of Systems Innovation." I printed that headline, framed it, hung it next to my desk, not to remember what they did, but to remember what I chose to do after, because bitterness is heavy. But building, that's flight. We launched an internal program called Credit Check. Any contribution without a name got flagged. Any recognition email had to list contributors. Every intern exit interview asked the question, did you feel seen? It wasn't radical. It was correction. A system-level fix for a problem I knew too well. One day, I got a message from Mina. "Do you realize 3 of our team members are pregnant?" And no one's talking about coverage panic. I smiled. Because she was right. They weren't worried. Because no one was indispensable and no one was invisible either. We'd designed redundancies, shared credit, built backups. They knew they could leave and come back and their names would still be on the system. This is what legacy looks like. Not applause, not headlines. But watching someone walk through a door you once had to break down, without ever knowing you had to break it. 6 months after I left Helios, I heard they lost the Archer account, their second largest client. The rumor, they couldn't maintain the innovation pipeline. Too many key staff gone. Too much talent bled away. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. But I did get an email. From Warren M. Helios. Subject? Coffee. I didn't reply. Some doors you walk through. Some you leave closed. Some you seal behind you. Later that year, I was invited to speak at the Women in Tech conference. I almost said no, but then I thought of every Lena, every Priya, every me out there, still wondering if they're allowed to take up space. I stood on stage in a dark blue suit, looked out over the audience, and saw faces I recognized, former teammates, silent allies, and in the back, Warren, older, smaller, uncomfortable. Our eyes met. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I nodded, because he was no longer part of the story. Just part of the prologue. You don't win by burning bridges. You win by building new ones stronger, wider, with your name carved into the beams. Legacy isn't about being remembered. It's about creating a world that doesn't forget others. They thought it was just timing, a coincidence, a shift in the market, but I knew the truth. Empires don't collapse by accident. They collapse when the people holding them up walk away. It was a quiet Tuesday. I was in my office, real office, not a glorified cubicle preparing our team's quarterly strategy memo when the email came through. Subject, executive opportunity at Helios Innovations. From confidential search parallax exec. On behalf of our client, Helios Innovations, we are conducting a confidential executive search for a new VP of technology to spearhead the company's return to innovation-driven strategy. I laughed, out loud, the kind of laugh that startled my assistant. Not because it was funny, but because it was perfect. For years, I walked their halls with my head down. Now they were floating recruitment feelers. To the woman they once deemed not executive ready, now they needed someone to revitalize their innovation culture, to bring fresh vision, to lead them into a new era, and the name they thought of. Mina? I didn't reply, but I did forward the email to 3 brilliant women in my network, with the note, if you decide to talk to them, ask for more than you think they'll give, then double it. You're worth it. Because the win wasn't being asked back. The win was knowing I'd never need to return. The ultimate revenge isn't their fall. It's your rise so high they can't even see you anymore. 5 years had passed since that day in the conference room. The day I stood in the back, holding my breath, watching my work get paraded around like a costume someone else decided to wear. And now, my name was on patents. My voice was in keynote speeches. My methods were being taught in workshops I didn't even organize. Not because I was loud, but because I was undeniable. I walked through the Meridian offices that morning, sipping my coffee, passing by the team I'd built. Priya, now lead integration engineer. Lena, heading up developer culture and mentorship. Gis, Mina, promoted to technical strategy director. Javier, I Osman Sen, running ops across 3 continents. They weren't just surviving. They were leading, and none of them had to scream to be heard. Later that day, I had a call with Zoe, a young developer I met at that same Women in Tech conference a year earlier. She reminded me of me, down to the hesitation in her voice. They're using my code, she said, but I'm not even listed in the release notes. I listened, let her finish, then asked, what do you want to happen next? She paused, then whispered, I want my name on what I built. I smiled. Then let's get to work. This is the part they don't teach in business school. Not how to win, but how to lift others as you rise. How to name what was stolen. How to take it back. And how to build something better in its place. Some people say success is the best revenge. I disagree. The best revenge is rewriting the entire story. So the next generation doesn't inherit our silence. They inherit our systems. Transparent, equitable, powerful, with their names already written in. I still think about that moment sometimes. Back in that room, me, the algorithm, the question about Southeast Asia, the stunned silence, the pause before I spoke. It changed everything, but not because I yelled, because I refused to disappear. So if you're out there, sitting in meetings where no one says your name, building things others take credit for, questioning your voice, let this be your blueprint. You don't have to scream. You don't have to sabotage. You don't have to rage. You just have to keep building, in silence, if you must. But build so well, they can't move forward without you. And when they finally ask you to sign, make sure the name on the future is yours.